video is going to be a reading of one of my favorite novels ever. It's a little bit cheesy and maybe not for everyone, but it is the first book series that ever got me into reading. Now, of course, I have many favorites such as Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, but this is the one that started my love for reading. So let's get started, and I really hope that you enjoy it. Going to be reading the blurb, so you can decide whether or not you want to stick around, but trust me, it's really good. And if you ever saw the movie Vampire Academy, it did not give the book justice. It's honestly a really good book. Okay, let's get started. Only a true best friend can protect you from your immortal enemies. Lissa Dragomir is a Moroi princess, a mortal vampire with a rare gift for harnessing the earth's magic. Her best friend, Rose Hathaway, is a Dhampir, a guardian whose blood is a powerful blend of vampire and human. Rose's life is dedicated to protecting Lissa from the dangerous Strigoi, the fiercest vampires, the ones who will stop at nothing to make Lissa one of them. After 2 years of freedom, Rose and Lissa are caught and dragged back to St. Vladimir's Academy, a school for vampire royalty and their guardians-to-be. But inside the Iron Gates, life is even more fraught with danger, and Strigoi are always close by. This novel is by Richelle Mead. I felt her fear before I heard her screams. Her nightmare pulsed into me, shaking me out of my own dream, which had something to do with the beach and some hot guy rubbing suntan oil on me. Images, hers not mine, tumbled through my mind. Fire and blood, the smell of smoke, the twisted metal of a car. The pictures wrapped around me, suffocating me, until some rational part of my brain reminded me that this wasn't my dream. I woke up, strands of long dark hair sticking to my forehead. Lissa lay in her bed, thrashing and screaming. I bolted out of mine, quickly crossing the few feet that separated us. "Liss," I said, shaking her. "Liss, wake up." Her screams dropped off, replaced by soft whimpers. "Andre," she moaned. "Oh God." I helped her sit up. "Liss, you aren't there anymore. Wake up." After a few moments, her eyes fluttered open, and in the dim lighting I could see a flicker of consciousness start to take over. Her frantic breathing slowed, and she leaned into me, resting her head against my shoulder. I put an arm around her and ran a hand over her hair. "It's okay," I told her gently. "Everything's okay. I had that dream." "Yeah, I know." We sat like that for several minutes, not saying anything else. When I felt her emotions calm down, I leaned over to the nightstand between our beds and turned on the lamp. It glowed dimly, but neither of us really needed much to see by. Attracted by the light, our housemate's cat, Oscar, leapt up onto the sill of the open window. He gave me a wide berth. Animals don't like Dhampirs, for whatever reason, but jumped onto the bed and rubbed his head against Lissa, purring softly. Animals didn't have a problem with Moroi, and they all loved Lissa in particular. Smiling, she scratched his little chin, and I felt her calm further. "When did we last do a feeding?" I asked, studying her face. Her fair skin was paler than usual. Dark circles hung under her eyes, and there was an air of frailty about her. School had been hectic this week, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd given her blood. It's been like more than 2 days, hasn't it? 3? Why didn't you say anything? She shrugged and wouldn't meet my eyes. You were busy. I didn't want to. Screw that, I said, shifting into a better position. No wonder she seems so weak. Oscar, not wanting me any closer, leapt down and returned to the window where he could watch at a safe distance. Come on, let's do this. Rose, come on, it'll make you feel better. I tilted my head and tossed my hair back, baring my neck. I saw her hesitate, but the sight of my neck and what it offered proved much too powerful. A hungry expression crossed her face, and her lips parted slightly, exposing the fangs she normally kept hidden while living among the humans. Those fangs contrasted oddly with the rest of her features. With her pretty face and pale blonde hair, she looked more like an angel than a vampire. As her teeth neared my bare skin, I felt my heart race. With a mix of fear and anticipation, I always hated feeling the latter, but it was nothing I could help. A weakness I just couldn't shake. Her fangs bit into me, hard, and I cried out at the brief flare of pain. Then it faded, replaced by a wonderful golden joy that spread through my body. It was better than any of the times I'd been drunk or high. Better than sex, or so I had imagined since I'd never done it. It was a blanket of pure, refined pleasure, wrapping me up and promising everything would be right in the world. On and on it went. The chemicals in her saliva triggered an endorphin rush, and I lost track of the world, lost track of who I was. Then, regretfully, it was over. It had taken less than a minute. She pulled back, wiping her hand across her lips as she studied. You okay? Yeah. I lay back on the bed, dizzy from the blood loss. I just need to sleep it off. I'm fine. Her pale jade green eyes watched me with concern. She stood up. I'm gonna get you something to eat. My protest came awkwardly to my lips, and she left before I could get out a sentence. The buzz from her bite had lessened as soon as she broke the connection, but some of it still lingered in my veins, and I felt a goofy smile cross my lips. Turning my head, I glanced up at Oscar, still sitting in the window. You don't know what you're missing, I told him. His attention was on something outside. Hunkering down into a crouch, he puffed out his jet black fur. His tail started twitching. My smile quickly faded, and I forced myself to sit up. The world spun, and I waited for it to right itself before trying to stand. When I imagined it, the dizziness set in again, and this time refused to leave. Still, I felt okay enough to stumble to the window and peer out with Oscar. He eyed me warily, scooted over a little, and then returned to whatever had held his attention. A warm breeze, unreasonably warm for a Portland fall, played with my hair as I leaned out. The street was dark and relatively quiet. It was 3 a.m, just about the only time a college campus settled down, at least somewhat. The house in which we'd rented a room for the past 8 months sat on a residential street with old mismatched houses. Across the road, a streetlight flickered, nearly ready to burn out. It still cast enough light for me to make out the shapes of cars and buildings. In our own yard, I could see the silhouettes of trees and bushes. And a man, watching me. I jerked back in surprise. A figure stood by a tree in the yard, about 30 feet away, where he could easily see through the window. He was close enough that I probably could have thrown something and hit him. He was certainly close enough that he could have seen what Lisa and I had just done. The shadows covered him so well that even with my heightened sight I couldn't make out any of his features, save for his height. He was tall, really tall. He stood there for just a moment, and then he stepped back, disappearing into the shadows cast by the trees on the far side of the yard. I was pretty sure I saw someone else move nearby and join him before the blackness swallowed them both. Whoever these figures were, Oscar did not like them. Not counting me, he usually got along with most people, growing upset only when someone posed in immediate danger. The guy outside hadn't done anything threatening to Oscar, but the cat had sensed something that put him on edge. Something similar to what he always sensed in me. Icy fear raced through me, almost but not quite, eradicating the lovely bliss of Lyssa's bite. Backing up from the window, I jerked on a pair of jeans that I found on the floor, nearly falling over in the process. Once they were on, I grabbed my coat and Lyssa's, along with our wallets. Shoving my feet into the first shoes I saw, I headed out the door. Downstairs, I found her in the cramped kitchen, rummaging through the refrigerator. One of our housemates, Jeremy, sat at the table, hand on his forehead, as he stared sadly at a calculus book. Lyssa regarded me with surprise. "You shouldn't be up, Rose. We have to go, now." Her eyes widened, and then a moment later, understanding clicked in. "Are you really? Are you sure?" I nodded. I couldn't explain how I knew for sure. I just did. Jeremy watched us curiously. "What's going on, guys?" An idea came to mind. "Lys, get his car keys." He looked back and forth between us. "What are you—" Lyssa unhesitatingly walked over to him. Her fear poured into me through our psychic bond, but there was something else too. Her complete faith that I would take care of everything, that we would always be safe. Like always, I hoped I was worthy of that kind of trust. She smiled broadly and gazed directly into his eyes. For a moment, Jeremy just stared, still confused, and then I saw the thrall seize him. His eyes glazed over and he regarded her adoringly. "We need to borrow your car," she said in a gentle voice. "Where are your keys?" He smiled and I shivered. I had a high resistance to compulsion, but I could still feel its effects when it was directed at another person. That, and I'd been taught my entire life that using it was wrong. Reaching into his pocket, Jeremy handed over a set of keys hanging on a large red keychain. "Thank you," said Lyssa. "And where is it parked?" "Down the street," he said dreamily. "At the corner, by Brown, 4 blocks away." "Thank you," she repeated, backing up. "As soon as we leave, I want you to go back to studying. Forget you ever saw us tonight, okay?" He nodded. I got the impression he would have walked off a cliff for her right then and there if she'd asked. All humans were susceptible to compulsion, but Jeremy appeared weaker than most. That came in handy right now. "Come on," I told her. "We've got to move." We stepped outside, heading towards the corner he'd named. I was still dizzy from the bite and kept stumbling, unable to move as quickly as I'd wanted. Lyssa had to catch hold of me a few times to stop me from falling. All the time the anxiety rushed into me from her mind. I tried my best to ignore it. I had my own fears to deal with. "Rose, what are we going to do if they catch us?" she whispered. "They won't," I said fiercely. "I won't let them." "But if they found us, then—" "They found us before. They didn't catch us then. We'll just drive over to the train station and go to LA. They'll lose the trail." I made it sound simple. I always did. Even though there was nothing simple about being on the run from the people we'd grown up with. We'd been doing it for 2 years, hiding wherever we could and just trying to finish high school. Our senior year had just started and living on a college campus had seemed, well, safe. We were so close to freedom. She said nothing more, and I felt her faith in me surge up once more. This was the way it had always been between us. I was the one who took action, who made sure things happened, sometimes recklessly so. She was the more reasonable one, the one who thought things out and researched them extensively before acting. Both styles had their uses, but at the moment, recklessness was called for. We did not have time to hesitate. Lyssa and I had been best friends ever since kindergarten, when our teacher had paired us together for writing lessons. Forcing 5-year-olds to spell Vasilissa Dragomir and Rosa Mary Hathaway was beyond cruel, and we'd, or rather I'd, responded appropriately. I'd chucked my book at our teacher and called her a fascist bastard. I hadn't known what those words meant, but I'd known how to hit a moving target. Lyssa and I had been inseparable ever since. "Do you hear that?" she asked suddenly. It took me a few seconds to pick up what her sharper senses already had. Footsteps, moving, fast. We had 2 more blocks to go. "We've got to run for it," I said, catching hold of her arm. "But you can't run." It took every ounce of my willpower not to pass out on the sidewalk. My body didn't want to run after losing or while still metabolizing the effects of her saliva, but I ordered my muscles to stop their bitching and clung to Lyssa as our feet pounded against the concrete. Normally I could have outrun her without any extra effort, particularly since she was barefoot, but tonight she was all that held me upright. The pursuing footsteps grew louder, closer, louder, closer, louder, closer. Black stars danced before my eyes. Ahead of us, I could make out Jeremy's green Honda. Oh God, if we could just make it. 10 feet from the car, a man stepped directly into our path. We came to a screeching halt, and I jerked Lissa back by the arm. It was him, the guy I'd seen across the street watching me. He was older than us, maybe mid-20s, and as tall as I'd figured, probably 6'6" or 6'7" even. And under different circumstances, say when he wasn't holding up our desperate escape, I would have thought he was hot. Shoulder-length brown hair tied back in a short ponytail, dark brown eyes, a long brown coat, a duster, I thought it was called. But his hotness was irrelevant now. He was only an obstacle keeping Lissa and me away from the car and our freedom. The footsteps behind us slowed, and I knew our pursuers had caught up. Off to the sides I detected more movement, more people closing in. God, they sent almost a dozen guardians to retrieve us. I couldn't believe it. The Queen herself didn't travel with that many. Panicked and not entirely in control of my higher reasoning, I acted out of instinct. I pressed up to Lissa, keeping her behind me and away from the man who appeared to be the leader. "Leave her alone," I growled. "Don't touch her." His face was unreadable, but he held out his hands in what was apparently supposed to be some sort of calming gesture, like I was some sort of rabid animal he was planning to sedate. "I'm not going to." He took a step forward. Too close. I attacked him, leaping out in an offensive maneuver I hadn't used in 2 years, not since Lissa and I had run away. The move was stupid, another reaction born of instinct and fear, and it was of course hopeless. He was a skilled guardian, not a novice who hadn't finished their training. He also wasn't weak and on the verge of passing out. And man, was he fast. I'd forgotten how fast guardians could be, how they could move and strike like cobras. He knocked me off as though brushing away a fly, and his hands slammed into me and sent me backwards. I don't think he meant to strike that hard, probably just intended to keep me away, but my lack of coordination interfered with my ability to respond. Unable to catch my footing, I started to fall, heading straight towards the sidewalk at a twisted angle, hip first. It was going to hurt. A lot. Only it didn't. Just as quickly as he'd blocked me, the man reached out and caught my arm, keeping me upright. When I'd settled myself, I noticed he was staring at me, or more precisely, at my neck. Still disoriented, I didn't get it right away. Then slowly, my free hand reached up to the side of my throat and lightly touched the wound Lissa had made earlier. When I pulled my fingers back, I saw slick, dark blood on my skin. Embarrassed, I shook my hair so that it fell forward around my face. My hair was thick and long and completely covered my neck. I'd grown it out for precisely this reason. The guy's dark eyes lingered on the now covered bite a moment longer and then met mine. I returned his look and quickly jerked out of his hold. He let me go, though I knew he would have restrained me all night if he'd wanted to. Fighting the nauseating dizziness, I backed towards Lissa again, bracing myself for another attack. Suddenly, her hand caught hold of mine. "Rose," she said, "don't." Her words had no effect on me at first, but calming thoughts gradually began to settle in my mind, coming across through the bond. It wasn't exactly compulsion, she wouldn't use that on me, but it was effectual, as was the fact that we were hopelessly outnumbered and outclassed. Even I knew struggling would be pointless. The tension left my body and I sagged in defeat. Sensing my resignation, the man stepped forward, turning his attention to Lissa. His face was calm. He swept her a bow and managed to look graceful doing it, which surprised me considering his height. "My name is Dmitry Belikov," he said. I could hear a faint Russian accent. "I've come to take you back to St. Vladimir's Academy, Princess."